Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sovereign Day, Buenos Aires. Sovereign Day is where institutions, policymakers, and indeed blockchain innovators come together to talk about the future of global financial markets. I'm Sébastien Couture. I'm GP at Interop Ventures. We're an early stage fund, and we're super pleased today to be co-hosting this event with Cosmos Labs. Truly innovators that are pushing for sovereignty in the blockchain space. Institutions are coming on chain. We've seen this across the world, and certainly Latin America is a market that is super relevant to the sovereignty narrative. Latin America, Argentina, and countries in the region constantly are fighting for their sovereignty, their economic sovereignty, their monetary sovereignty, military sovereignty, and Cosmos has been at the forefront of the app chain and sovereignty narrative since the very beginning, since its very inception, when the co-founders of Cosmos were thinking about a world where we'd have thousands of interconnected sovereign blockchains. So I hope you'll stick around today for our packed agenda where we have institutions, policymakers, blockchain innovators, corporates talking about how sovereignty will impact their business, their economies, and indeed their nations. So I'd like to now welcome our MC for the day, Mauro, who will be kicking us off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for coming. I know the agenda is very tight for everyone this week in DevConnect. Today, as Sebastian told, we are going to explore the interoperability between institutions, banks, and the new economy, the new blockchain economy. For today, I want to thank the Cosmos team and the Interop Ventures for trusting me in this, with this function. Well, today we're going to start with the beginning of Cosmos. We're going to have Magnus Marenek, CEO of Cosmos Lab. He's going to do an overview of Cosmos Stack and its impact on finance and business, and why 2026 will be a key year in this merge between traditional institutions and blockchain technology. Magnus, please, a nice clap and welcoming to Magnus. Yes, please.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I think all of X is down currently, which is a great time to talk about sovereign systems and decentralization. But so today, maybe work on that a little bit. Today I want to chat about what Cosmos is and what we're trying to do, and how this technology can be leveraged for, in particular, rethinking global finance. So just a little bit about me. I'm one of the co-CEOs of Cosmos Labs. If anyone doesn't have the history of Cosmos, very storied history, but one of the things that happened recently is my company, Skip, was acquired by the Cosmos Foundation, the ICF, and we formed Cosmos Labs out of that. A little bit more about Cosmos Labs. We're a team of about 40 people. We're based between New York City and Berlin mostly, but then also in a couple other places. And we're backed by a $300 million treasury. And so we have the runway and we have the funding to basically continue this mission of building open source software and bringing institutions on chain for the next 10 years. This gives us a lot of confidence that we can actually manage the sales cycles of major enterprises and manage the process required to really bring governments and institutions on chain in a real way. So what is Cosmos and what's the stack? Well, at a glance, Cosmos is the most adopted blockchain stack in the world. So what that essentially means is there's over 200 chains live today that are running on this technology. A lot of the chains that are running on Cosmos, you may not even know are running on Cosmos, right? So these include things like Polygon, right, with its peppermint consensus, which was loosely based off a former version of Cosmos's version of consensus called Tendermint, right? So there's $70 billion of assets that's secured across these different chains, which makes it one of the largest, the second largest by ecosystem market cap that's actually secured on this technology. And then also in terms of active volume today, there's over $1 billion that's transferred every single day across these different chains. If you look at it visually, this is sort of what Cosmos looks like. It's a network. It's a network that's connected by IBC, and it is something that is truly spread out across the globe, right? The nodes that underpin each of these networks is, fully geo-distributed. We would never have an incident like Twitter, is the hope. And it is not just retail applications. It's institutions, it's governments, it's some of the largest chains that we know and love today, and it continues to grow. In particular, Cosmos is a stack that lets you build your own blockchain. So what that essentially means is you can build your own layer one, right? With your own consensus, your own applications, your own ecosystem, fully owned by you and with the rules defined by you. It is fundamentally different from Bitcoin, from Ethereum, from Solana, from anything else, in that you can fully define and customize your own programmable layer one. As part of that, there are 6 major components that make up any single Cosmos chain. The Cosmos SDK is one of the first. This is essentially an application framework that lets you easily build, a Turing-complete application framework that lets you easily build any kind of application as a blockchain. It's all built in Go, so it's very easy to understand. It's very easy to approach. The second is Comet BFT consensus. So this is now probably the oldest, if not the most secure consensus mechanism that was invented. That is fast finality, which means that it finalizes same block, very different from Ethereum, and allows for IBC, which is the other major benefit of Cosmos, which lets all these different blockchains interop with each other. Behind the scenes, we also have a bunch of APIs and tools that let any Cosmos chain interact very easily with the outside world, with Web 2, etc. And then finally, we have the Cosmos EVM, which lets a Cosmos chain be fully EVM compatible, bring over all the Solidity smart contracts that you have, Aave, etc., and makes that extremely simple to use. We are the most performant, customizable, and EVM compatible blockchain stack used on the most number of blockchains across everything, right? We see Cosmos chains that are used fully for NGO use cases, fully for CBDCs, fully for institutional capital, fully for RWAs, right? We see it across almost every industry. Our core belief is that the future is not going to live on one blockchain, right? It's not all going to live on Ethereum. It's not all going to live on Solana. It's not all going to live on Bitcoin. The belief going back to 2015 was that there would be hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of blockchains. And our entire thesis was built around that belief. And since 2015 and until now, that's been true, right? There have been many more blockchains than we thought at the time. And those blockchains are all connecting with each other. And what we've seen recently is that has extended to other places that we didn't expect. And so in the last 2 years, we've seen a huge growth in the number of institutional blockchains, in the amount of stable coins, in the amount of issuance, which is a place that we didn't really foresee there being a lot of growth back in 2015, 2017. See here, stablecoin volume has been exponential in terms of the amount of issuance that it's had. We expect this to continue. We view stablecoins as the first real use case outside of Bitcoin, basically since the inception of crypto. And 2025 was the year that institutions started coming on chain. So we saw BlackRock launch their own BUIDL chain. We saw Goldman Sachs start to do stuff in tokenization. We saw Stripe now building Tempo, which is their own layer 1 blockchain. Circle building their own layer 1 blockchain. Google building their own layer 1 blockchain, right? So we're seeing the major institutions of the world start to build their own crypto platforms. And I think what's really notable about this is they're not choosing to build smart contracts. They're not choosing to just issue assets. They're choosing to build their own chain. In addition, we've seen governments start to come on chain, right? In the US, there's been huge legislation that has been passed over the last year that enables stablecoins to be more widely adopted. Across all different countries, there's some kind of initiative to genuinely explore, with budgets behind them, genuinely explore how can we build for a tokenized era. Where is Cosmos in all of this adoption? Well, as I said, institutions and governments are building L1s. They're not building layer 2s, and they're not building smart contracts. They are building their own platforms, which is exactly what we saw in the internet, right? When the internet sort of came out, there were a bunch of different internets that we saw. There was like AppleNet. There was, all the different internet standards that came out of the IEEE. And at the beginning, what people believed is that people would basically share resources and be on their own groups of internets. But eventually what we saw is that people started to build their own servers, they started to build their own websites, they started to build their own platforms, right? And so we strongly believe that in today's market, these institutions are going to be building their own stuff. They're going to be building their own platforms. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? There's control and de-risking, which comes from building your own platform. There's performance. The kind of performance you can get out of building your own chain versus building on someone else's chain is crazy, right? You see numbers like 10,000 TPS, which is already more than the number of transactions that Visa processes on a day-to-day basis. You see a lot of things around value premium, right? So what I mean by that is there's a perception that if you build a platform, that is going to be more valuable in the aggregate than if you build on somebody else's platform, right? And that makes a lot of sense to the largest companies today that are used to building platforms. In particular, there's a lot of technical benefits to building on Cosmos. So just to talk through some of these, in the case of Cosmos, settlement is instant, which means as soon as a transaction happens in the next block, it's already finalized. That is not true for Ethereum and definitely not true for Bitcoin, where it takes a lot longer. In terms of performance, we can get to really high performance numbers because you can run your own infrastructure. Customizability, by building your own chain, you can customize everything. Customize your consensus. You can customize your interoperability, right? You can define who can join your network and who can't, right? These are things that may sound a little bit not in the traditional ethos of crypto, but are actually essential to have this technology become mainstream, because these are the things that people require. Gas and fees. We've seen a lot of Cosmos chains launch with 0 gas fees, right? This is impossible in other networks. Operator set, you can sort of choose how you want to run your consensus, POS, POW, POA, etc. Bridging, you have a native solution with IBC versus having to use all of these other third parties. And then also reliability. Cosmos has been around for 10 years, right? So, in terms of performance, I think it's just worth calling out that a lot of the things that we're working on right now at Cosmos are getting us to performance numbers that we hadn't before thought possible. And at this point, I think at 50,000 TPS, which is where we're seeing Comet perform with the latest upgrades, you can run multiple economies on that, right? That is greater than the max capacity of Visa. I think at this point, we really don't have an excuse anymore for why we can't rebuild financial systems on top of blockchain rails. There's no reason. And I think the most important point is this is already happening, right? There are already over 200 blockchains that have been built, including some of the most ambitious markets and the most ambitious projects in crypto. So for example, Figure Markets, which has a Cosmos chain called Provenance, they just issued $45 billion of HELOC assets and are now a top 30 token in terms of their RWA token. Ondo is one of the largest RWA issuers in the world and is also building their chain on Cosmos. XRP Ledger, Programmat, Lombard, Story, Babylon, the list is endless, right? And these are just the beginning projects that are starting to build on this technology. And where we're seeing this go is worldwide and into the more institutional market. So I spent a lot of time this year just, basically traveling around. It's definitely very exhausting. But we spent in particular in Japan and in Korea, where we see a lot of growth happening in terms of legislation that is making the country much more open to tokenization. And I think the core thing that we're realizing is this is not a US-based market, right? This technology has the capacity to be global. And in many cases actually appeals more to outside the US, where I'm based, than it does inside the US. And so what we see is that, Cosmos has a lot to do in terms of global expansion, which is partly why we're excited to be here in Argentina. So I think it's worth noting that these initiatives outside of our traditional spheres are getting a lot of traction. So there's a project right now called Project Trinity, which we find really exciting. It basically connects CBDCs and IBC with the traditional financial system, like SWIFT. One of the teams that's working on this is Toki, which is here at this conference. So if you get a chance to chat to them, it's really interesting. And then similar, it's sort of all in this similar bucket, Programmat is also involved in this, which is basically a consortium of Japanese banks that basically are collaborating to bridge the rails between SWIFT and IBC. I want to chat a little bit about how we build. So in particular, we try to mimic how enterprise builds, which we see as a three-stage process where essentially things start a lot slower, right? In traditional crypto world, things are used to moving very fast, right? A one-year life cycle is considered quite slow. But in the world of enterprise, in the world of government, this is actually a very fast timeline, right? And so we try to basically build around the timeline expected by our partners. So for a CBDC, for example, this is oftentimes a 3 to 5 year process, where in the beginning, we start as a pilot, right? We build some kind of initial solution, and we test that, and we give the government time to essentially explore that solution, build around it, understand how it works. And then we transition it to a consortium chain where they can start to bring in more partners, right? So for example, if we're building the CBDC for Argentina, then that might start as an initial project just inside their own servers. And then they would add in, let's say, some other banks, private banks, add in some private credit unions, and expand from there. And then finally, what we try to encourage is these chains add in IBC and become fully connected. So they can IBC out into all the other chains and begin sort of like fully interoperating with the rest of crypto. Our team itself is built around that kind of sales cycle. So what I mean by that is out of the 40 people we have a whole team that is dedicated to going on site, teaching people about this technology, spending time with them, in the language that they prefer, and being a on-the-ground, on-prem deployment center, right? So we will fly to Turkey, for example, and spend time with them spend time with whatever team is there to actually figure out how does this technology work. Because I think the core thing sort of that is blocking all of this adoption is just education. People don't understand, right? And so whenever you educate somebody, you're doing a benefit for the entire industry, but we spend a lot of time just educating. In particular, I want to chat about CBDCs. We're in Argentina, a place where there is a lot of innovation around the currency and around their economic system. A lot of that innovation is much needed. And where we've been approaching the problem in general is we see a huge use case for sovereign blockchain technology in the currency space, in the digital currency space. And so we've been doing a lot of work on the CBDC side. Just to chat through like what a CBDC is, basically it's programmable money, right? It's a version of a internet currency that is backed by the central bank that can be fully programmed to the needs of individuals and to the country. Right? I think a lot of the time CBDCs get flack for being very centralized or having a lot of oversight. The way that we see it is it's much better than the traditional currency system, and it's a step in the right direction, right? It's a step in the direction of countries giving their citizens control over their own money, self-banking and self-custody, right? Once we get there, we can start to worry about things like privacy, which they're building technology for, this very moment, and there's a lot of innovation there. But I think this is really where we want to start. We want to get governments to actually put their currencies on blockchains that they own, right, versus shared ledgers. We think the future is going to consist of many governments running their own CBDCs. We think that at some point in the future, every country will have their own blockchain, right? And all of those blockchains are going to be interconnected. We think that this vision of the future is a lot more exciting than the traditional financial system that we have today. It's a lot more open, it's a lot more accessible. You can program on top of it. It's fully customizable, and it's fully open, right? I already said that. But basically what we view is these countries can now actually break down a lot of the barriers that they had to working with each other, which we view as a huge thing that hasn't happened yet. Around the world, we're spending a lot of time with policy leaders to talk about how this transition can take place. And it's slow, right? It takes a lot of time to convince central bankers that they should completely redo their currency. And so we spent some time, for example, at the last conference at Cosmoverse, chatting with Jürgen and Leonardo, who are from the Central Bank of Europe, about what it would look like to build a digital euro, right? And what we anticipate is that the countries that move faster on this space are going to have a huge advantage in the next stage of the global economy. They're going to have a huge advantage in actually building out their economic system for more opportunity, to have a better user experience for their users around money, because at the end of the day, money is a product, right? It's a product like any other. We want it to have a great UX. We want it to be accepted everywhere. We want it to be safe, right? And we have the technology now to build that for every economy. I want to shout out one particular partner, PeerSyst, who is also here today and I believe will be speaking later. But PeerSyst is helping us in particular with our Latin American CBDC projects that we're working on. So we'll be announcing a lot of those soon, but we're talking to a lot of different governments inside of LATAM about building their own chain that they can issue their own currency on and then interconnect with each other. Their CEO is Ferran. And so if you do see this man around, give him a shout. He's doing a lot of great work trying to bring Latin America on chain. And the way that we work with PeerSyst is we provide the technology. PeerSyst is the team that actually goes on site and builds with the government and finds out how they need to use this. In sum, we want to build a more connected Latin America, right? We believe that right now is an incredible time for so many countries here in this continent to figure out how they want to build their financial systems for the next 10, 20, 100 years. And they have the privilege, right? Latin America has the privilege of not having built their extremely successful economies 70 to 100 years ago, when the kinds of things that were available at the time were very limited. We have so many better tools now, right? And blockchain is one of them. And we think that by building with that as a foundation, we can build a much, much more interesting financial system for the generations that come after. This is a blank slide. Yeah, just want to say thank you. It's a real pleasure to have you all here. As I said, Twitter is down and we had some trouble getting out some of the announcements around the event. But for the people who are here, I really appreciate you being here. And yeah, you feel free to find me or any member of Cosmos Labs around and chat about the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Magnus. Well, as an Argentinian, I really understand what's the problem with money. We all native Argentinians have that dynamic of inflation, and we are like all macroeconomists by nature, so thank you very much. I believe that these kinds of technology and proposals are really interesting to explore and to try to solve problems that affect us daily. So I believe that Magnus did a very good overview of the state of affairs of blockchain worldwide and the institutional adoption of it. The next panel is a panel in which we're going to talk about how banks and enterprises consume Web3 services with people that have worked in banks and now are exploring the blockchain industry. As a moderator, we will have Nicolás Poggi, the CMO of Cosmos Lab. Nico, if you want to come in. An applause for Nicolás, please. You go ahead and sit here, and I will present. ¿Cómo está, Nico? We will have as panelists Juan Ignacio Podestá, CBO of LATAM XO. Si quieren ir subiéndolos. Sí. Juan, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? Sorry, it's Spanish because he's Argentinian. So I invite you, every one of you, to explore Spanish. That's a very beautiful language also. Ponle por ahí, por favor. We will have Santiago Lacasia, CEO of Aconcagua Finance and ex-Banco Galicia also, a very important bank here in Argentina. A big applause for him, please. Santi, ¿cómo estás? And last, César Matienzo, ex-CTO also of Galicia and Mariva, and now he has a high management program in MIT, so he has a foot in both places. Cesar, nice to meet you. And we have the final panelist that we will have to squeeze in is Andrés Kim, expansion manager of Tether, the stablecoin wheel in Argentina. Tether is very, very well adopted, and we use it as a means of payment very usually. So a big applause for Andrés Kim also. Ahí te suena la silla. Toma.
Bienvenidos. Muchas gracias por sumarse. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to Sovereign Day. Bienvenidos. Muchas gracias también. Estamos ahí apretados en el escenario. Ha sido una semana súper linda de ver Ethereum llegar a Buenos Aires y Argentina. For those watching at home, I'm going to be speaking Spanish. I have a wonderful set of panelists from Argentina and Latam joining me today. And it's in good time that we do a little bit of education as well on institutional adoption and what are the fears and constraints that banking and financial institutions have in the world and in Latin America. Entonces, súper contento de tenerlos aquí en el panel. Ya estamos, creo que todos miqueados y podemos arrancar. César y Andy, ¿cómo estás, Juaní? Hola. Sí. Dale. Ahí estamos.
Espectacular.
Perfecto.
Ahí estamos.
¿Cómo estás, Juaní?
Muy bien, la verdad. Está un poquito fuerte, pero contento de estar acá. Un momento impresionante que estamos viviendo. Y muy bueno ver a Cosmos también venir a Argentina. Creo que estamos viviendo un momento único, en donde en muy poco tiempo también en Argentina vamos a empezar a ver esta adopción institucional. Así que expectante y obviamente construyendo mucho.
Buenísimo. Muchas gracias por venir. Juaní, ¿cómo te ha tratado esta semana Buenos Aires?
Yo, Santi.
Santi, perdón.
Bien, muy bien. La verdad que impresionante la cantidad de gente de todo el mundo que hay acá esta semana. Fue muy impresionante ayer ver en la DevCon un poco los anuncios que hicieron de que realmente parecería que estamos llegando a ese momento del famoso slowly then suddenly. Parecería que estamos llegando a ese momento donde blockchain y toda esta tecnología va a penetrar en todas las capas.
Y un colega o former colleague también, César, de Banco Galicia, y muchísimas más instituciones también de la escuela de MIT. ¿Cómo te trata esta semana y ver a Buenos Aires pintarse de Ethereum, pintarse de Cosmos con más de 15.000 personas viniendo a ver y aprender?
La verdad que estoy muy emocionado, o sea, mucha gente por todos lados, en el mundo académico, en el mundo institucional, en el mundo emprendedor, y todos buscando una convergencia y una misma conversación. Entonces, eso la verdad que se viene dando, se viene madurando a poco, y estos lugares o estos momentos y estamos ahí en la puerta de la entrada de algo que viene para largo y madura bastante bien.
Sí, es un trabajo duro y arduo. Muchos de ustedes han estado trabajando desde banca y tradicional por años en tratar de empujar esto hacia adelante. Tenemos otros más en la cúspide desde Tether. ¿Cómo te trata venir para Buenos Aires, Andy?
Bueno, buenísimo la verdad. Siempre es una buena excusa por la comida, por supuesto,
Sí.
venir para acá. Te confieso que estoy un poquito, el clima me tiene un poquito confundido. Creo
A
que
todos.
hoy decidí traer una mochila con distintos outfits en caso de que cambie el clima, ¿no? Pero buenísimo estar acá.
Acá es un día de paraguas, un día de salís volando con ese mismo paraguas. Hoy está bastante lindo y soleado, tenemos un par de shows en el día. Muchachos, gracias por sumarse. Lo que vamos a charlar hoy día es, tenemos esta cúspide, el encuentro de la regulación que está madurando en la banca, en stablecoins, como la Genius Act en Estados Unidos. Tenemos esta otra cúspide que se encuentra con los bancos, los asset managers y las instituciones financieras, finalmente con menos miedo a explorar estas tecnologías. ¿Qué ha cambiado en los últimos 12 meses, 6 meses, desde su perspectiva, que han trabajado tantos años en empujar esta adopción? ¿Qué ha empezado a calentar el escenario para las entidades bancarias? ¿Cómo ha sido para vos, Juani, desde la Tamexo?
Bien, yo creo que fundamentalmente lo que faltaba no era tecnología, sino era regulación, era tener la capacidad de poder crear esta confianza para poder interactuar con blockchain de la forma digo, hay muchas posibilidades para los bancos de poder adoptar esta tecnología. Hubo una MAGE acá en Argentina en 2021, del cual iba a ser un closed loop. Digo, creo que ya estamos todos, sabíamos lo que iba a pasar, y hoy, estando quizá a meses de que vuelva a suceder, pero con más impacto, donde todos los bancos van a poder empezar a competir contra las fintechs, creo que se está de alguna manera viendo hacia adelante cómo se va a adoptar masivamente esta tecnología y va a ser custodial. Yo creo que de alguna manera se va a tener que medir un poquito que esta tecnología nació un poco con Satoshi Nakamoto desde la descentralización, y creo que todos teníamos el ímpetu de que sea lo más descentralizado posible, y dentro de todas estas barreras que tuvimos siempre fueron la regulación o las instituciones con desconfianza de esta tecnología, y tenemos que entender que al fin y al cabo, para que se adopte esta tecnología tenemos que culturalmente aceptarla, y normalmente el 90 y pico % de la población siempre espera que las instituciones digan esto es confiable. Por ahí nosotros somos más innovadores dentro de esa curva de adopción de tecnología.
Con más apetito a riesgo a veces.
Totalmente, totalmente. Y creo que lo que cambió fundamentalmente es eso, un poco instituciones diciendo que sí, después de decir mucho tiempo que esta tecnología era una estafa, que era un scam, que no se iba a poder utilizar de manera masiva, que no era segura. Creo que hoy se demuestra que no le faltaba madurez a la tecnología, sino que le faltaba un poco de empujón a nivel institucional para que empiece a adoptarse. Y lo que veo es que hay una urgencia hoy. Nosotros hace 7 años haciendo billeteras, impulsando un poco todo lo que decía el cocido de Cosmos, que decía que cada uno va a tener su propia plataforma. En general lo que faltaba es que siempre venían plataformas nuevas a ofrecer esta tecnología, con falta de confianza, falta de opción, pero creo que ahora se va a ver como cada vez más cada empresa o cada grupo de empresas que tiene una transaccionalidad, un flujo de caja, va a empezar a utilizar blockchain de manera propia, ¿no? Con su propia identidad, dándole a su propia comunidad y a sus propios ecosistemas la capacidad de poder transaccionar y ser parte de ese revenue. Entonces creo que lo que va a pasar ahora es un tema de identidad, ¿no? Cada uno va a utilizar esta tecnología con sus propias reglas. Lo que más le faltaba a la tecnología, más que maduración, eran lógicas de negocio, y creo que estamos en ese surface en donde se va a empezar a explorar y a impulsar.
Ya están más empaquetados los casos de uso, ya son un poquito más comunes. Santi, César, desde su perspectiva, más desde la banca tradicional, ¿qué ha cambiado? Porque ustedes han estado hace años piloteando estas pruebas y tratando de empujar y empujar.
Sí, mirá, yo te contesto con una anécdota. Esta semana estaba hablando con una familia dueña de un banco muy grande de Argentina, hablando de adopción de blockchain, ya charlas larguísimas hace muchos años, ¿no? Pero una anécdota que pasó esta semana, hablando con uno de estos dueños, me dice, che, blockchain todo bien, sabemos que por ahí va el futuro, pero dice, no me puedo olvidar, hace 2 años y monedas, él estaba en el Foro Económico de Davos, en Suiza, en una charla organizada por el FMI, y el main speaker de esa charla era Sam Bankman-Fried, de FTX, y se vendía entre todos los bancos del mundo y todos los reguladores del mundo como, miren, por acá va cripto, acá está la seguridad, acá está el futuro. Y a la semana siguiente, o a las 2 semanas de volver, fue el cataclismo de FTX. Entonces, es como que en la mente de estos decisores y dueños de bancos, me imagino de acá y del resto del mundo, todavía está ese recuerdo de, che, pará, por acá me estaban marcando las grandes instituciones del mundo que iba a cripto, y esta persona ahora está en la cárcel, ¿no? Y te lo engancho esa misma anécdota con, ayer en la DevCon, Vitalik Buterin, cuando da su charla, la primera diapositiva que pone es una foto de Sam Bankman-Fried entera, donde Sam ahí diciendo, yo vengo a esto para cambiar el mundo, y lo siguiente que hace es, bueno, ¿saben qué es Ethereum? ¿Saben qué es blockchain? Todo lo contrario a esto, ¿no? Todo lo contrario a lo que esta persona representa. Entonces, yo creo que lo que va cambiando es que vamos dejando atrás a Sam Bankman-Fried. Lleva tiempo, lleva años. La contracara de eso es la parte cultural, que tiene que ver con, yo por ejemplo soy mentor de la Universidad de San Andrés, ¿no? Entonces tengo contacto con la generación que viene bastante más abajo que nosotros, que ya ando con pelo blanco. Pero siempre cuento lo mismo, ¿no? Les pregunto, che, levante la mano de acá, ¿quién tiene cripto, tiene stables, tiene Bitcoin? Cuando hago esa pregunta en San Andrés, 9 de 10 levantan la mano, ¿no? Cuando hago mis charlas con bancos, y quizá vos, César, lo viviste cuando en Banco Mariva les hice esa pregunta a mesas esas de 10 personas donde están compliance, sistemas legales, etcétera. Bueno, ya que venimos a hablar de adopción blockchain en el banco, levanten la mano, ¿quiénes han tocado? Y 1 de los 10 levanta la mano, ¿no? Y esos son los decisores actuales en el sistema financiero. Entonces, ahí es como que se juntan esas dos cosas, ¿no? Por un lado, el cómo vamos dejando atrás las malas experiencias y las malas implementaciones de blockchain. Yo creo que todos en este panel y probablemente acá sentados vemos el valor intrínseco que tiene esta tecnología, que es potentísimo y realmente va a cambiar las finanzas, y es que no las está cambiando ya. Está Andy ahí de Tether, han hecho una revolución en las finanzas, ¿no? Habiendo emitido la primera stablecoin, ¿no? Eso fue absolutamente revolucionario, ni hablar Bitcoin, ni hablar Ethereum, ¿no? Pero creo que por ahí va el tema de ir pasando esas malas experiencias, y por otro lado también el mismo cambio cultural de la gente, de la demanda que está pidiéndole a los bancos esto hace rato. Galicia lo hizo en el 2021 por demanda de la gente que decía, quiero comprar Bitcoin en mi banco, ¿no?
Claro,
así
al
que
final es la presión del usuario que está del otro lado.
la
que
demanda
ya te
por un
pide.
lado, que tira, y la oferta que empieza a entender por dónde va.
Por ahí te conecto quizás, antes de pasar por vos, César, con Andy, que estás en la otra cara también de esto, que es Tether tratando de introducir stablecoins en el mercado financiero latinoamericano y global, con gran éxito, pero es desde otra completa perspectiva, ¿no?
Sí, bueno, hay varios factores que considerar, ¿no? Yo creo que el número uno, lo que ha cambiado definitivamente desde el punto de vista institucional es Genius Act. Las conversaciones son, yo diría, mucho más fáciles, no tan divertidas como en un inicio. Particularmente a mí me pasó que este año me tocó ir a Corea como 7 veces, pero la primera visita fue antes de Genius Act. Y el tono de la conversación era, demuéstrame por qué yo te tengo que escuchar. Pero luego de Genius Act, el tono de la conversación es, ¿podemos tener una exclusividad contigo? Entonces cambió mucho, ¿no? La disposición y todo esto. Eso es lo que yo veo desde el punto de vista institucional, por eso es que digo que ya hasta que le quité un poco de gracia al trabajo, porque... digamos,
¿Cuál es la pelea cuando vas a hacer un pitch ahora, no?
Sí, ya no lo hay, no es tan divertido. Ese por el lado institucional. Yo creo que lo otro que ha cambiado, que es muy importante, obviamente la maduración de mercado ha traído una nueva, mejorada experiencia de usuario. Y eso es primordial. Yo recuerdo mucho, yo inicié 2017. Obviamente 2017 yo creo que todos recordarán el tema de las ICOs y demás, ¿no? Entonces yo recuerdo que estaba hablando con un amigo, estábamos iniciando y yo le digo, mira, de esta manera tú puedes participar en proyectos antes de que salgan, y estaba tratando de explicarle cómo utilizar MetaMask en aquel momento. Y él me decía, mira, yo no creo que esto sea el futuro porque yo no lo entiendo. Yo no veo a mi papá, yo no veo a mi abuelo aprendiendo, o sea, no hay manera, no existe. Entonces, obviamente, hoy día la experiencia de usuario está mucho mejor, tanto para opciones descentralizadas como las centralizadas. Entonces, eso facilita mucho la adopción.
Y también los casos de uso ya son los que decimos, como decís, es aburrida las conversaciones en Corea, ahora más que, bueno, usa una stablecoin para quizás comprar un NFT, ahora los casos de uso son, bueno, Stripe integrando stablecoins para bajar costos, es otra la modalidad.
Bueno, referente a eso es interesante porque en Corea justamente la conversación era, no le veo el caso de uso. Pero yo digo, ok, yo entiendo su perspectiva, pero creo que el problema es que lo están viendo de una manera muy local. Y justamente la pequeña diferencia que adiciona blockchain es que quita estas barreras y lo hace global. Entonces yo entiendo que no ven el caso de uso en Corea porque obviamente los rieles locales son muy buenos y realmente no hay una necesidad.
No hay fricción.
Exacto, que de hecho es el tercer punto y es el más importante, que es la necesidad. mucha gente dice ahorita, hablando de la adopción institucional, sí, en países donde, digamos, todo estaba bien, pero en países donde no estaba bien, ya la adopción está, y estaba,
Claro.
porque la
problemática
necesidad
existe.
te obliga a moverte, ¿no? Entonces es una gran diferencia, pero por lo menos en Corea, obviamente ellos, si no adoptan hoy, no pasa nada mañana, que es justamente el elemento que algunas veces complica, pero yo lo que siempre les digo a ellos es, cada vez que yo me reúno con grandes empresas acá, lo primero que hablan, o el foco es globalización, expansión. Yo digo, ok, ¿cómo ustedes quieren globalizar si lo están haciendo de una manera, desde una visión, desde una perspectiva local? Es muy difícil comunicarse. Entonces yo le digo, yo entiendo que yo no pretendo decir que alguien en Corea va a cambiar un won a USDT para pagar lo mismo que podía hacer directo con won. No tiene sentido, pero para el cross business hace mucho sentido, porque Corea hace mucho negocio con países en todas partes del mundo, especialmente en Latinoamérica, tanto para vender como para comprar. Eso es número uno. Lo otro que yo veo es, obviamente el caso de remesas, no para los coreanos, pero muchas personas de distintos países como Filipinas, Mongolia, etcétera, van a Corea y luego envían las remesas porque
Claro.
tienen mejores condiciones.
Que es un caso de uso que en Latinoamérica también es muy, muy, muy
por
fuerte.
supuesto, lo entendemos muy bien.
Tanto de la gente que se va para Europa, Estados Unidos. Pero una de las palabras clave que estás diciendo para mí es la fricción y la necesidad, ¿no? Tenemos fricción, necesidad, existe un caso de uso. Si tenemos el ambiente regulatorio, también que está maduro, hay un poco más de confianza, que estamos, como decís vos, dejando atrás los FTX del pasado. ¿Qué fricciones quedan? Y César, hablamos un poquito de esto antes,
Sí.
pero son las fricciones como más técnicas.
A ver, voy a decir algo poco romántico. Ahora yo también estoy en el mundo de la inteligencia artificial. Y lo que se dice en la inteligencia artificial es que no nos pase lo mismo que pasó con blockchain a nivel de adopción de tecnología. Y les explico por qué. Porque nosotros nos movemos en querer impulsar la tecnología con casos de uso. Muchas veces queremos resolver los grandes problemas del mundo. Y la realidad es que hoy, por ejemplo, si vas a los números de inteligencia artificial, el 95% de los proyectos no llegan a producción. Justamente por ese nivel de ambición que empieza a aparecer en la adopción de tecnología. Con blockchain, obviamente, hay años de maduración, hay 15 años trabajando fuerte. Y estamos en la situación en la cual hay que entender esas fricciones del otro lado. Ahí es donde yo a veces me paro como el experto en los core bancarios. Cuando vos ves el sistema financiero, se construyó en capas geológicas, podríamos decir. Una es la regulatoria, es decir, todo el banco y todos los bancos están construidos para cumplir con la regulación. Y recién hablaban de los accionistas. Está bueno pensar en los accionistas porque son los que quieren innovar y quieren ganar dinero, pero hay que entender que hay un montón de empleados trabajando en el sistema financiero que tienen otro mindset. Y para ellos el cumplimiento regulatorio es lo principal. La segunda capa geológica que se armó en el mundo financiero es...
Ya es arqueología esto, directamente.
Claro, y que es el de la Tierra, es el planeta donde convivimos. Eso es interesante, porque vos tenés que construir sobre ese planeta. Son la rentabilidad. El mercado financiero, por definición, tiene que ganar plata. Entonces, sobre la regulación se construye la rentabilidad y los productos que te generan ganar plata. No importa si son fallonistas o si son aburridos. Lo importante es que ganes plata. Y el tercero es la innovación en productos. ¿Bien? Hoy lo que está pasando, que está buenísimo, es que cuando vos ibas con una nueva tecnología, y ibas con Andrés, que recién estábamos hablando, a la gente que mueve el sistema financiero, no le entienden. No entienden cómo funciona blockchain, no entienden cripto, le da miedo. Imagínate una persona de compliance, un abogado de bancos que su trabajo es proteger bajo la regulación a los accionistas o al empleado.
Ante cualquier incertidumbre,
Bajás.
no.
Sí. No, exactamente. O comprobámelo. Perdón, ya te termino. Entonces, hoy pasó que la regulación está empezando a habilitar. Entonces, si la regulación empieza a habilitar, obliga a innovar las cabezas de la gente que trabaja en el mundo tradicional de banca. Y además, en caso particular de Argentina y en Latam, nos están exigiendo competitividad. Entonces, empieza a aparecer la regulación que te abre una puerta y la competitividad en productos nuevos. Y ahí es algo súper interesante que es lo que está cambiando ahora.
Se acumularon las capas.
Sí.
Ya hicimos un poco de arqueología, pero tenemos más productos para mostrar a las entidades bancarias, que es un poco de lo que estaba hablando Mag, el COSEO anteriormente. Ya 1 de cada 10 no se entiende y los otros 9 estamos trabajando. ¿Querías comentar un poquito de...?
No, iba a hacer un comentario que sí, en sí siempre es mitigar riesgos todo el tiempo. Y ligándolo con lo que decía Andrés también, de que cambió la conversación después de Genius Act, hay un tema de que durante años estamos como nosotros yendo a generar esa sensación de urgencia, de que hay que utilizar esta tecnología para poder mejorar los rieles y bajar los costos. Creo que ahora es distinto, ahora es como dame exclusividad. Entonces, creo que hay un rol importante de poder, ok, ahora que lo quieren hacer, ¿cómo lo implemento rápido? ¿No? ¿Cómo hago para no tardar mucho tiempo? O la pregunta muy clara es ¿cómo gano plata? O sea, siempre se piensa un poco como esto margen positivo, siempre, ¿no? O sea, una vez que voy a plantear un negocio, yo ya sé cómo voy a ganar plata.
Claro.
Entonces, lo que creo que va a cambiar, y cierro así, continuamos, es que los bancos o incluso los bancos que tienen licencias para pificar y demás, creo que lo que cambia ahora es que ellos van a plantear un negocio en donde saben que van a tener 5 clientes que lo van a distribuir de una manera que nunca un nuevo Lemon, por ejemplo, podría hacerlo, ¿no? Entonces, creo que eso va a cambiar.
Es una tensión súper interesante entre nosotros tratando de empujar a que haya una adopción más horizontal y homogénea, empujando, como decís, educando, con el caso de uso llega la claridad en regulación y el momento que entienden la ventaja competitiva que ofrece te dicen, bueno, dame la exclusividad y de vuelta volvemos a crear un sistema no homogéneo, ¿no? Con una mejora financiera general. Una de las partes de mitigar el riesgo de esta adopción también, que yo creo que desde el equipo de Galicia y Santi has hecho más pilotos, es esa escalada gradual que tienen los bancos hoy día. ¿Cómo ves que llegaría un producto de este tipo, blockchain o digamos, la tokenización de los activos de un banco a producción? ¿Qué pasos tiene que llevar en escala?
Sí, mira, yo creo que salió varias veces en esta charla. La cabeza de un banquero piensa en una sola cosa, que es disminución de riesgo, ¿no? La banca, a diferencia de las fintech o de los exchanges, tiene el santo grial de la creación de dinero, ¿no? Que es la intermediación financiera. Recibe depósitos y puede emitir dinero, emitir crédito con esos depósitos, ¿no? Y es algo tan poderoso que está muy, muy protegido por regulaciones, por licencias, etc. Y está bien que así sea, porque cuando lo desproteges pasan los cataclismos que han pasado en la banca tradicional. La banca tradicional tiene miles de FTX en el armario, que bueno, que se fueron a lo largo del tiempo ir cubriéndonos, ¿no?
Muchos equipos de PR ahí que
Sí.
ha pasado el tiempo ya.
Exactamente. Entonces, como piensan absolutamente en términos de riesgo, ayer por ejemplo escuchaba al presidente del Banco Central de Argentina que hablaba de esto de que en las bancas el nuevo gobierno va sacando regulaciones que venimos trayendo hace muchos años y las va sacando muy de a poco y es muy gracioso porque cuando termina su charla él dice y las vamos a seguir sacando en la medida que veamos que el riesgo que asumimos es el necesario. O sea, así piensan, ¿no? Siempre en términos de riesgo. Entonces lo que yo veo es que la banca va a ir tomando esta adopción cuando vea que el riesgo de hacerlo ya llegó a un nivel que sea apetecible, ¿no? Esto que hace Cosmos, por ejemplo, de que trae un stack tecnológico probado con mega clientes, con muy buen carácter, etcétera, yo creo que baja en la mente del banquero el riesgo de que cuando de golpe yo iba y me juntaba con ellos hace 2 años a hablarles de una tecnología que era Ethereum y Polygon, ¿no? Es como que se va solidificando. Entonces yo creo que lo que va a ir pasando es que va a pasar esto, ¿no? La misma tecnología que es espectacular y es muy potente va madurando, por lo tanto baja la percepción de riesgo y por lo tanto seguramente veamos a los bancos argentinos ahora volver a habilitar el buy, hold and sell con partners, los partners que ya conocemos, pero no vería extraño que conversaciones más profundas aparezcan, como hacer una propia L1 en un banco.
Claro, y como ha dicho Mac también, en Latinoamérica es algo muy fuerte y presente porque ha llegado a ese punto la tecnología o el stack de Cosmos, pero nosotros tampoco nos miramos al ombligo, es algo que ocurre con las tecnologías que hemos como vos decís, se podían estar pitchando antes o otros stacks, o Tether, que en la mente de muchas instituciones financieras es una tercera parte, un third parte, una dependencia. Igualmente está llegando a un estado de madurez que ya ves la adopción de Tether en continentes clave como África, que necesitan pagos económicos y veloces, y es increíble. ¿Cómo han construido esa confianza en el mundo financiero, siendo también lo que alguien desde el mundo de riesgo diría una dependencia o third party?
Sí, mira, yo creo que siempre el enfoque de Tether ha sido en buscar dónde está la necesidad. Realmente el equipo es bastante pequeño, pero enfocado en mercados emergentes. Entonces yo diría que cuando la conversación es complicada, es porque no estamos en el lugar correcto. Porque la conversación es complicada cuando están hablando con negocios o personas o instituciones que no tienen la necesidad. Entonces, ellos pueden decir, mira, yo tengo que evaluar esto muy bien, pero porque saben que mañana no va a pasar nada, entre comillas, ¿no? Pero cuando tú vas a sitios donde realmente ellos te dicen, mira, ellos mismos te dicen, no me importa, yo necesito que tú me resuelvas esto ya, porque si no, no sé qué es lo que va a pasar mañana. Las conversaciones son muy diferentes. Y lo que hizo muy bien Tether, bueno, realmente nosotros aprendimos del mercado porque USDT creció solo. Tether eran 30 personas hasta hace 2 años.
Hace muy poco. Sí.
Hasta hace muy poco. ¿Por qué? Porque ellos tenían la visión de que si el producto es bueno, las personas que lo necesiten lo van a adoptar. Enfoquémonos en que el producto sea bueno y la adopción tiene que venir sola, así como fue Bitcoin. Hoy día tenemos un equipo de expansión, pero sigue siendo muy pequeño. Creo que no llegamos a 40 personas en todo el mundo. Entonces, siempre nos hemos enfocado mucho en identificar y estar claros de que estamos prestando el servicio en el sitio correcto y ese ha sido el secreto.
La paciencia es algo que nos falta muchas veces en esta
También.
industria, que creemos que va a ser de un día para el otro, así inmediatamente. Regulación que ha tomado años y años de pilotos también, como bancos como ustedes y personas en el mundo tradicional armando estos puentes. Muchachos, muchísimas gracias por esta conversación hoy. Gracias por sumarse a Sovereign Day con nosotros. Ha sido un gusto tenerlos. Esperamos verlos ahora en el resto del día. Y ha sido un placer poder conversar con ustedes.
Gracias por la invitación.
Well, thank you very much for everybody in the panel. I have to speak in English. I would love to speak in Spanish as they did, because yo soy acá argentino, así que Spanish is my mother language. We heard the perspectives from banks, from people with experience from the institutional side, all the hurdles they had to go through, all the different pathways that regulation is still creating its limits. Now we're going to see the other side, the on-chain debate and the diverse visions of the future of open finance. We will have a three-people panel moderated by Sebastián Couture, founder of Interop Ventures, that you know him already. Big applause, please. We're going to have Magnus Maranek, again, from co-CEO of Cosmos Labs. Antonio Neto, head of growth of LATAM from Solana. And Nick White, CEO of Celestia. I leave you with a big love. I leave you with them and the on-chain debate.
Test. Hey. All right.
Test.
Oh, good.
Maybe Cloudflare is running these mics. So yeah, welcome to this on-chain debate. Very happy to be moderating this panel with the three of you, and I think it's this is the kind of spicy panel that I absolutely love moderating. So let's start with this. Everyone's everyone's trying to get at the institutional pie and bring institutions onto their ecosystems. Cosmos obviously is in this space. Solana is also making a lot of progress in the Celestia ecosystem as well, and we don't have anybody from sort of the purely Ethereum focused ecosystem here, but they're also making headway. Are all these ecosystems actually competing on the same metrics, or are you solving for different problems? Like, how do you see the complementarity of your different approaches, or are you purely competing on adoption from institutions?
Well, I would suggest maybe you start because of data is a key piece of this. And then maybe we can discuss a bit more like what they're looking for and so on. Because just briefly touching this, since I already started, what we are seeing is blockchains are databases, right? So at some point they will just interchange data between these databases. So I think that's the key part of this. So there is some, I would say, business competition in the sense of we want to have that volume on the chain, we want to have that activity happen on the chain, but there is a bunch of other important parts when we talk about infrastructure that is super important for this debate. Regarding open finance, the models proposed by Cosmos, and I think there is an even bigger discussion here on corporate chains versus public permissionless chains, right? So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's a key piece on actually building the right parts and stakeholders of these new database, I would say.
Nick, you've been summoned.
I've already kind of forgotten what the original question was. Was it like?
Are you all competing for the same volume and for the same institutional users, or are you providing different solutions that can act as a sort of complementary set of solutions?
I think it's the latter, definitely. I think each of the teams and like projects represented here choose a different point on the trade-off spectrum. I think that like the Cosmos stack is the like fully like maximally sovereign sort of like own everything yourself, except like here's a bunch of tools that are pre-built to make it easier for you. I think Celestia is a little bit more on the, hey, we actually have a underlying infrastructure provider that takes slightly even more of the work off of your plate, but then you do take on a dependency of an underlying protocol. So it's a little bit, it is very sovereign, but there's also a shared protocol component. So you're less fully independent, which has pros and cons. And I think Solana is like a much more, much less sovereign, but for that reason, even easier potentially to build on. And so I think it just comes down to which customer you're talking to and what their priorities are. And I think we're still, figuring out what institutional players want. And I don't think there's a one size fits all. But it does seem to me at least that a lot of them do want more control. And they do want to be able to roll their own infrastructure to some degree. I think that appeals to them. Like we've been seeing, I'm sure Mag will bring this up, but Google's building their own L1. Tempo decided to build an L1. Arc by Circle is also an L1. So institutions do seem to be buying into the sort of application-specific chain thesis. More so far at the L1 level than as roll-ups. Although we've also seen, we have Base, we have Ink. So I think the jury is still out. To be fair, I'm actually not really aware of like what's being built on Solana, but I know there are integrations on Solana, but I haven't. Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to hear like what's happening on the institutional front.
Definitely. You want to go first, then I can come back on.
Yeah. I don't want to. I mean, I'm also curious. I think, I mean, the question is phrased in a way that, yeah, it is assuming that we're all, I think, offering some kind of similar thing, or I guess like that's your question to figure that out. I think from my perspective, institutions generally want one of two things. The first one is they want exposure to crypto assets. So they generally want access to, let's say, Sol, or they want access to TIA, or they want access to, stables and things like that, or they want to put their assets in those ecosystems to find new marginal buyers. The other way that we've seen institutions get involved is treating crypto as a technology that they can replace some kind of internal system with, where I think then you start to get into these questions around product of, okay, what is the best solution that fits your needs, right? And usually those needs are really silly, right? They're not silly in that they don't matter. They're silly in that they're things like regulation, right? Like, oh, we have to run this here, or oh, we have to do reporting this specific way, or actually we can't let this user use the protocol. There's a lot of things that they need to change, and oftentimes those things I think are against the traditional ethos of crypto to some degree, right? Or requires some kind of very corporate or traditional way of constraining the usage of the protocol so that it fits a specific kind of criteria that they have. I think on the first side, right, for the asset usage side, we're very open as Cosmos, and we want people to interoperate, and we want to give all the institutions, if we can, access to Solana, access to Celestia, access to Ethereum, access to Bitcoin. I think on the second side, we're really focused on, okay, how do we build something that is customizable enough while also remaining scalable, that they can build that fits their needs so that they don't have to get new legislation passed to actually explore crypto?
Well, there is, I think Brazil, I'm Brazilian, so based in São Paulo, and I think Brazil has had a history of technology adoption, and we saw a lot of adoption here in Argentina as well, but the route of adoption is different. Here was a lot of people looking to have savings accounts and hold USDT and just protect their savings. Brazil, we had a more, let's say, degen approach, like people looking to trade and have this type of opportunities and so on. So that was definitely the first wave that we saw on institutions, and I saw a lot of people talking about FTX. I was at FTX before I went down with it, my savings and all. And so the first epoch, let's say, that we saw was people either, so some banks that were more risk takers were down to arbitrage Bitcoin, trade on DeFi sometimes, just lend money on Aave and so on. But then they started looking as like, how can I offer these assets to my clients? So you take Itaú, one of the biggest banks in the region, they literally just started offering custody services to their customers. Not even selling, but giving them access to custody services so they can safely keep their crypto there. And that was 2021 to 22. And then I think right now what we are seeing is most of these players, they are on the other end of this spectrum. Some of the players are like, I want to have validators in infrastructure where I can control my trading aspects or transfers, or having control of the structure of sending that. Because for them, and like the way that we approach this as Solana is, it's an infrastructure for an existing market, right? It's financial services. We know the use cases, we know the problem statements out there. We are just building some stuff or evolving some stuff that is completely limited by regulation, so the evolution is limited. Most of the times they will want to have something private to run, like as their own database, but they want to verify that somewhere. They want people to double check on that information because they understand that public chains are valuable. So we are seeing this evolution of the institutional players going from just offering the basic stuff closer to their core to start exploring these new applications, be either processing payments, cross-border payments, be either providing liquidity in a pool, or just evolving or offering new products to their customers. But I think key part is they continue to have compliance controls. So QIC, AML, it's super important for them. And basically, what we are seeing right now is we can sometimes just take a place like Brazil and do some exercises on how things are going all around the world. And right now, the bill in Brazil, what's been discussed, is going to a point where they were accepting not having self-custody. So not allowing people to send stable coins to their own wallets. But people can keep their money, right? Without anyone knowing. So I think there is some key aspects on this that us having this conversation is super important for us to get close to them and help build something that is viable for keeping everyone's rights in terms of being self-sovereign, having their own chain, their own self-sovereignty on operating that.
So you mentioned that blockchains are databases. It's true. They're also coordination mechanisms, and I think that's where they thrive, at least in the public blockchain setting. I think there's some confusion, perhaps, around the utility of private blockchains. Certainly, this is something I keep trying to wrap my head around, and I keep coming back to the intranet. like in the 2000s, up until cloud computing really became the norm, every SME and up until large enterprise wanted to have their own intranet systems internally within their organization. I worked at companies where we had server racks, sort of in the closet, and there was no cloud computing for a number of reasons: sovereignty, privacy of data, also like internet access. But this infrastructure is now ubiquitous, and although there is a resurgence now of people going back to kind of intranet type systems, it's very much like on the fringes. When it comes to blockchains, the coordination aspect of a public blockchain, I think, is one of its most powerful, and censorship resistance, but everything comes with it, one of its most powerful properties. How do we argue for fully sovereign blockchains with a small set of actors that probably agree with each other anyway, or probably operate under the same legal system where sort of counterparty risk is not that high? Will private blockchains be like the intranet in the future? Will everybody kind of revert back to public, or how do we see this playing out in the next 10, 15 years as these things become more ubiquitous across business and enterprise?
I think private blockchains. So a private blockchain is essentially not to be confused with a blockchain that has privacy, right? But a private blockchain,
permission blockchain, if you will. Yeah.
Right. It's a blockchain that's run on-prem on a company's servers without any kind of external validators, and also probably is like heavily restricted in terms of its access. Right, so users cannot access the blockchain freely. They have to go through some kind of process to basically get access to it or get a wallet or whatever. I think private blockchains are, the only place that those might make sense is as a drop-in replacement for a different kind of technology, right? So for example, if people are using accounting software, you could probably run that on a blockchain, right? If people are using taxation software, people are using payroll software, all of that could probably be rebuilt as a blockchain, a single node blockchain, right? Just because of how the technology is structured. I think the question is that good enough to actually be a successful business? Or is that good enough to actually be a product that people really enjoy and like? I think what we see private blockchains as, though, are experimentation software, so that people can understand how the system works, because the truth is, right now, blockchain is too scary, right? It's too scary for companies. They get scared. They look at it and they're like, what can I do to make sure that this doesn't make me blow up, right? And somebody once said something to me, which I think is really true, which is banks survive by doing risk management very well, right? It's just a giant risk management game. It's because all they do is loan, right? And all they do is give money out and take on new customers and deal with the federal government, et cetera. And so pitching banks and pitching companies that know risk management very well, you have to pitch something that they can control, right? Otherwise, they won't even consider it. But I think what we're trying to do more and more is once we get our foot in the door with something that looks very private, very centralized, convincing them that they can use it as a replacement for some of the more external vendors that they have, like Swift or Revolut or Wise or PayPal and all these things that they built on top of banks, right? And actually have the banks take over more of that stack because they have this base blockchain that they can use for cross-border payments and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I agree with Mag that just in some ways, like a private blockchain, like an internal blockchain, is a bit of like an oxymoron. Like in that world, it is kind of, that should just be a database, because what blockchains are databases where you don't have to control or trust the other people interacting with it, so they can't corrupt it. Like it's an incorruptible database, right? But then if it's just you and your trusted, friends within your company, hopefully you don't have to worry about them like corrupting it. Otherwise, you have other problems. But I do think there's going to be an interesting. There's still a desire for control, like some degree of control, right, over these public databases, and I think that's where that's why I've always resonated with the Cosmos vision and the application-specific chain vision, and that's what also Celestia sort of built and building towards, where you can have a chain that is customized and tailored to the specific, database, public database use case that you, as your, enterprise, are trying to create, and it probably has some interaction with the external world, but you have like a finer degree of control. It's not like you're just existing on someone else's stack. It's sort of like being able to spin up your own virtual server, or like build your own server essentially, like kind of in the development of the internet. And I think that like long term, what has to happen then is that these sort of still semi-public databases start to connect with each other and be able to talk to each other and be able to prove things to each other, and that's where like IBC and a bunch of the like up and coming interoperability standards and protocols come into play, where it's not like, I guess like, in Solana's world, it's like there's just one giant database that everyone shares, and in this more Cosmos Celestia-centric vision, it's like a bunch of different databases that can be more customized, like kind of on a spectrum of like sovereignty and public and private, and they can all talk to each other. And I think that, to me, makes a lot more sense and is a lot more more similar to the way the internet works today, and just seems like the right design to me.
Nick, I'm curious because I think oftentimes rollups are pitched as a great in between, where you get sovereignty, but you also get the benefits that come with having some kind of base layer that sort of like accelerate development. I think one thing that I've seen a lot is a lot of rollups have centralized sequencers. And what do you think is, like, what do you view as like the difference in regards to centralization concerns of like private blockchains versus rollups with centralized sequencers?
Yeah, fantastic question. So I think so there's a word that we use a lot in crypto, which is decentralized, but it's a good word because it kind of wraps up a bunch of different properties in one, but for the same reason, it can be kind of abused. So like when someone says a centralized sequencer, it's true. I prefer single sequencer, because the degree to which this single sequencer introduces centralization to your stack, your protocol, depends on a lot of other things. And there are ways. So a single sequencer in theory could censor you, right? So it can control who can interact with the chain or not. It could also be a honeypot for someone to try to bring down, and then the liveness of the chain is centralized. Or I don't know, maybe it's easier to hack into their infrastructure and steal some like key, private key, or also sometimes, this single sequencer is like the bridge, to and from Ethereum. So that's also that's where I get the most scared, is if that single sequencer is basically taking custody of your funds. But anyway, there are ways of constructing single sequencers in ways where they have a lot of the benefits of like censorship resistance. You could bypass the sequencer and interact with the base layer directly. You can you can have kind of like the same censorship resistant level as the base layer. You can have automatic fallback, so if the sequencer goes offline, like the chain stays up. So anyway, I think, but then also what I want to say is we often in crypto have made the mistake of thinking that, maximum decentralization is always the preferred, outcome. But in some ways, like I could see a bank being like, well, we're operating this chain. I want the ability to censor. Like I don't want, some dude in Iran to like, I don't know, be laundering money through my chain. So like I want to be able to like be the person. I don't want to outsource that to a set of validators who I can't necessarily control to be, OFAC compliant, for example. So I think that's also useful to have that spectrum available.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like most of these, I think the analogy that you made is great with the internet, because at the end of the day, these guys, they want to have some control because they need to operate on that basis. But if you go, I wanted to bring, while you guys were discussing, an example that came back into my mind was there is a case in Brazil that is one of the biggest registers of receivables in Brazil. It's called Nuclea. They have their off-chain legacy system and so on, but they started controlling the tokenization of those collaterals, and with that, tokenization platforms started to use that tokenized collateral to be traded, right? So for them is like I control the full chain of value here. I have the control of this legally, so I just wrap this token and allow everyone to trade. Just a parenthesis here, just as I said before, blockchain is a database, but let's put it a coordinating database, let's say, for value and so on. Because if you take the blockchain, if I'm not mistaken, there is 13 technologies to make a blockchain. There is consensus protocol, there is the distributed ledger. So some of these guys, as Nick put, they might just need like the distributed ledger, just registering information because they legally are already the third party of that. But then when we talk about infrastructure, I think it's super important to have models and structure like Cosmos presents, because again, these guys will need some control that is enforced to them, that they need to somehow manage that. Right now, what the financial world does is they share spreadsheets. So this is a way better database for sharing information and giving more, I would say, robustness to this market, to the financial markets and institutions and so on, and how they will operate. Because other than that, and when you talk about sovereignty and self-sovereignty and so on, that's a different conversation. But in practical terms, these guys will need to have some control because of it's enforced on them.
Well, that's our time. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you guys for these wonderful insights. And yeah, thank you guys for being here and checking out the panel.
Cheers.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. We're going to have another panel. Let's wait for the chair to go off. Do you want a photo, Nick? Well, thank you very much, guys, for incredible talk. Now I'm going to have another task here. I'm going to be also a moderator today. This time we already had, to do just a review, we had a whole presentation of Cosmos. We saw and we heard about the perspective from experience of people with experience in banks. We have recently had the experience of the on-chain side, and now we're going to talk with people who really had interacted with governments, with CBDCs. I'm going to be the moderator, so hello. And Ferran Prat, CEO Peersist, please. A welcoming from Ferran, please. And Mariana Kotik. Anto, could you hand me the microphones, please, for them? Okay, dos. Okay. Primero. ¿Está ahí? Ah, bueno. Listo. Hombre. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming here. I will go straight to the bone, and I would like to. I would like to know that each of you have had a lot of experience with governments. What's the intention of governments integrating blockchain to their monetary systems? Grab the question in the air and let's talk about it.
Well, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I guess we all know that the systems need to be modernized. So they know that. They know they need an upgrade. They know they need to move forward. Even if they are not ready yet, they know the inefficiencies that we now have, and they are working towards fixing that. And that's why, in my experience, I mean, from LNet, we are helping institutions, and we are helping, currently we are working in a project with 11 central banks, exploring the benefits of this type of technology and how it can help to fix things that, like, I don't know, the settlements times that we have, the cross-border payments, and some other things that, of course, they will come up during the conversation. But I guess the thing is, even if they are not like ready to do it right now, they know they need to work towards that goal. And we believe the best way is to make them speak and work together, because there's a lot of actors that need to have a word on that, and a lot of actors that need to concentrate on how to fix these issues.
Do you think that they really need it? That's a question. I worked in politics like 5 years of my life. Do they really need it? Or we are imagining the virtues of the technology and think that they are going to adopt it?
You go first.
Hello, hello. Okay. So, yeah, I do think they need it, especially when we are talking about central banks or even commercial banks. Mm-hmm. There's other use cases for governments that, well, blockchain can be certainly useful, but essentially blockchain it's built to become a payment and finance system, after all. So what we are seeing right now is that there's all this innovation, all these technologies that has been spread out with blockchains. What we are seeing is that private institutions are not waiting for the public sector. So if the public sector is not getting the tech in place, they just go private, they launch their own stable coins, right? That they are extremely growing every year, so they are moving a lot of volume. That it's not happening with the fiat currencies, which at the end of the day, the technology that's supporting the value and the transactionality of all these assets, it's the technology that the central banks has, right? And the commercial banks are using these rails. So I think it's more than an option for them, it's a duty. Their duty as a public entity, it's to provide the latest on science, the latest on technology to make the payments as efficient as possible. So then money can flow in a much more efficient way with less cost, much faster, right? And all this bootstraps the economy at the end of the day, which ends up being a better life and more wealth for everyone. And I think they have the duty to constantly renew these systems to stay up to date with the technology. What we've seen in blockchain with the open source and with communities, it's a global movement, right? So everything has advanced very fast. The governments are very conservative, and they have to be for its nature. So they've been more like observing and looking at it. But we are reaching a point where the pressure on them is so high because everyone is just using stable coins, and the banks are not waiting for them to issue other forms of tokenized assets, bonds, etc. So they need to be on top of that. And the fastest way, one way it's they can build from scratch new things, or the other way is they can reuse all this scientific knowledge that is out there, and they can apply it within their governance, within their regulatory rules, and build it from there. So I think that's the moment. I think they are all acknowledging that. This is why more than 90% of the central banks are working towards using blockchain technology for CBDCs, because otherwise their system just became obsolete, and it's their duty to keep it up to date, right?
Yeah, I agree. I guess what they all know is that the system needs an upgrade. They cannot have like days of settlement when you have instant payments. And we have had this for some time now, and we know how fast this kind of all blockchain-based transactions work. So they know they need an upgrade. The how is what we are discussing now. So I guess this is the conversation that we need to have, and actually what your question is great, because it's the questions they are asking themselves. Do we really need this? Is this the best way to do it or not? And the only way to do it in a safe way is to try in a space where they feel comfortable to test if this is the right way to do it or not. And this testing needs to be not only inside a country, but between countries. That's why we think that this collaborative way to do it and to discuss this is the best way to do it, because it helps us understand if cross-border payments can be improved and how with this technology, and if this is actually the right technology to do it.
Yes, and if the bandwidth it's possible to like change the SWIFT system. When you are interacting with government officials, what do you find? What do you find? What are the questions? What are the doubts? What's the level of information that those government officials have? What's the landscape of this public sector towards this kind of technology?
Well, actually, most of the times, more like a CCO, I feel like a translator or interpreter between the language that institutions use and the language that the technology teams use to define what they need and how they will work with this to solve the problem. I guess this bridge is the most important thing right now, because they have a lot of doubts. Most of the teams that work in this type of institutions don't know the blockchain technology, and they don't have to, they don't need to. So we need to be efficient in a way to explain them what are the benefits and how it works. And also not only explain it in a way that, okay, I'm a teacher and you're a student, but explain them how they can fix real problems they have, and how that can match, the technology can match the real issues they have, and how they can replace their technology with new technology, but in a way that they can understand and that match the regulation, match their needs, because most of the times when tech people talk, they don't understand that institutions have a lot of regulation behind them and a lot of requirements, and you need to take consideration of all of that. That's why most of the times when you just put, I don't know, a central bank with, I don't know, a software factory that wants to sell them a solution, that conversation doesn't go well because of that, because they don't understand each other.
Yes, I totally agree in the definition of translators. I also come from, I studied law, so I come from the centralized side of the world, and I really understand that we need translators. What are the issues that you find that they have? You mentioned the issues, you know, they have lots of issues inside of them, inside of their own organizations, of their own systems. What are those issues?
Well, there's more than issues. I think there's better spell like room for efficiency, right? Or room for improvement. There's a lot of them. If you take it from an engineering perspective and you really understand how payment works today, you see like a paradise of places where you can put solutions. And that's fair, right? Because you are not going to change every year the entire technology that's supporting payments. But after 10, 20 years, and with the rate of progress of the technology we are having right now, this is very notable, right? So essentially, there's different places, but the most important is how a payment works, right? In order to see how a payment works, the most important thing you need to solve is to avoid the double spending. And what does it mean? This means essentially that the same quantity, the same amount that it's credited to some entity has to be debited from another in the same database. Because if you are not doing it on the same database, you have the risk of debiting one entity and not crediting the other, or crediting the other and not debiting the other one, right? So in order to solve that, you need like central parties, where, for example, in national systems, like in countries, central banks are playing this role. So if one bank wants to make a transfer to another bank, what they have in common is they both have an account to the central bank, and the central bank is the last party that makes this debit and credit so they can move the money. When you go overseas, when you make a cross-border payment, that's a little bit more difficult because you don't have your central party there, right? So you need a corresponsal bank, and you need a corresponsal bank where you share a balance from the source bank to the destination bank. This is always not the case. So then maybe your corresponsal bank has to have another corresponsal bank that maybe in this time they have like this part, right? So all these hubs are very inefficient because, first of all, every one of these players wants to take a commission for the services. Second of all, you need to have funding to all these banks, so you require funding in order to accept payments via Visa or MasterCard, that it's locked there to process these payments. You need funding to every corresponsal bank. You need funding to do your high-value payment system. You need funding for all the ACH payments. So there's a lot of money that it's not used properly because it's locked in this part, right? So what blockchain provides is actually just that, right? It helps putting a database where different parties can connect, that is making consensus from different rules. But essentially what blockchain is a modernized system to avoid double spending. So by that, you as a central bank, you can now leverage and offer this technology to your country, to the commercial banks of your country, so they can all make payments between them that are instant payments, which in the old technology seems like a huge achievement, but in blockchain it's just like the go-to-market, right? Like the basis is instant payments. So you can offer instant payments and cross-border between bridges, like for example IBC, that it's using light clients and it's using relayers. It allows you to make sure that when an amount is debited from a bank in Colombia, at the same time it's credited to a bank in Argentina and the other way around, and there is no double spending on that. So all these things are very efficient in capital, in time, right? Because when you go through different corresponsals, they may be in different time zones. You don't necessarily go from Colombia to Spain. Maybe you go to Colombia, to the US, and maybe you go to Japan and then to Spain. I don't know if that's an existing route, but this has different time zones. So it means that if it's a time zone that the bank is not operative, you have to wait, right? So you end up having cross-border payments that cost $30, that takes 3 or 4 days. And this is not competitive with sending in a stable coin somewhere in the world within seconds with a fraction of a penny fees, right? So that's one of the most bigger efficiencies. I can talk for a long time with more efficiencies, but I don't want to take the entire space.
Yeah, you described the architecture of nowadays payments, of the government payments, and you clearly offered the solution that blockchain offers. My question is, who are our biggest allies in this whole system or architecture, and who are our biggest, I wouldn't say enemies, but the people with which we will have more friction to change because we're like messing their business up?
I think like the biggest enemy, sorry, I will lead now. I think the biggest enemy is ignorance in general and lack of innovation. And I think it's like these organizations, as they have to be, by definition, are conservative. So most of the people, at the end of the day, it's like, who's working there, right? Most of the engineers at the bank doesn't want to take risks, maybe doesn't want to learn a new technology. They've been trained some years ago. And all this is the largest enemy to embrace these new technologies and to make payments more efficient, not only payments, all regarding the financial sector. I think this is the biggest enemy, but at the end of the day, all the banks want to do that. When you show these solutions, they just enlighten themselves on how is this possible and why are not doing this. So I think this is going to happen. It just taking time of these teams to build up.
Yeah, agree, and I think they struggle to see the real benefit. They are afraid to go with the hype of technology and then make a mistake. And of course, there's a lot in stake when we're talking about these kind of situations and matters. So I guess. Of course, they are afraid, and it makes sense. And we are happy they are afraid because we don't want them to jump too fast in just a new technology. I guess they need to really understand the benefits and to really try and do tests and actually test the technology and see how it works. I guess that's this situation. And of course. Work together, so it's not just the tech team pushing new technology, but it's all the management, the regulators, the private banks, the central banks, everybody talking about how this is going to work in the future and testing things together. So that's the way they're going to feel more comfortable doing it. Those are, as you said, conservative entities. And I guess we were discussing before how the entrepreneur industry works different, and everybody wants to be the first. In this case, nobody wants to be the first. They want someone else to go first and see how it goes, and then go after them. But yeah, I guess it's a process, and we need to be there to support that process in the best possible way.
Yes, you mentioned two ways. One, international payments, and the other one, the strategy of going to very little things. You mentioned before. So, which is the best strategy? Because if we want to go and try to change international payments, that's not a little thing. But if we are going to try a little thing, that's not international payments. So what's the strategy that you are applying in your conversations? It's independent for every conversation? You have a whole strategy that you are tactically having conversations with each government or country that you're talking about?
Well, I can tell you what we are doing. We created this project with 11 central banks within Latin America and the Caribbean. And we implemented a test, blockchain for testing exclusively. And we're testing small things like cross-border payments, just one small test. So we can start small and then grow after that. And that will allow us to understand a little bit more. And after that, to jump to the next step. So while we're doing this test and small test in a testnet, we are at the same time creating working groups, so all these actors can discuss and see what they need, what are their fears, and what they want on all the different regulations and laws across, Latin America and the Caribbean. We have very diverse situations, and each country is a different world. So that conversations also help to test small, but at the same time think big and think what are the next steps for everybody that works for everybody. That's our take on this situation and what we are doing to help them.
Yeah, well, from our side, we are more focusing in some different banks to provide much more deep, but also much more customized expertise. So they are maybe lobbying with a lot of entities, which is a great effort. In our side, we cannot offer our service to everyone. But we work with some central banks that really are committed to get there. And then we have the time to go much deeper, to build actually production systems, to test it, to train their teams, and to show them what's the end result of all that, right? And I think that there's different ways. When you are doing something customized, you can start from where is this bank right now. So some of them, they are just interested in instant payments, and I think a very good way to do instant payments if you don't have it yet is with blockchain, because then after that you will be interested in interoperability, and after that you will be interested in programmability, and if you hire software that's just for instant payments, then you will need to hire another software for interoperability, and then you will realize that this software also do instant payments and you've spent twice the money, right? So I think doing a very customized service, it's a good way to start. See what are the business priorities for this country, And then when you satisfy this demand, then you can show up all the other options that are available that you can build on top of the same infrastructure instead of building different softwares. And then I think it will be very natural for them to just keep going. And just a very good example for me, the company that is doing this better, it's Fireblocks. Fireblocks started with custody, which is in the root of everything. Most of the entities just get Fireblocks for the custody, but then you say, oh, now I want to process stable coins, and then you have the stablecoin module from Fireblocks, and okay, why I should take another player here? Or then you will have another one for decentralized finance or DEX, or another one for X or Z or anything that's happening, and then you can just acquire this model and everything works, right? And I think this is the way that it's the company that most successfully has been serving these products to banks and to these financial entities. And I think this is the way we should go also with the public sector.
I love it, I love it. I really love, I come from the public sector, so I really love the strategy part because, as you said, we need translators, and translators are not only, we also do strategy. We also understand how to go about with those conversations. Our time is up. I really loved being the moderator. Thank you very much for coming, and have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
For the invitation.
Well, before lunch, that's going to be, we have the last panel. Sorry. I hope you love, I really love this kind of conversation. I know it's not so popular, but politics, I really like it. So now we're going to have a panel of the other part of the most technical part, that's compliance, data, legal risk, and data risk and legal, making compliance Web3 simple. I know that most of the people in crypto likes to program, likes to play video games, but of course everybody needs a good lawyer now and then, and when they understand they need it, it's kind of too late. So I want to invite to the stage, the moderator is going to be Juan Manuel Campos. He's a partner at Sales. It's a local legal firm. The panelists are Delfina Calabró, Regional Manager of Pomelo, Lucrecia Caride, Corporate Lead of Ripio, and Magdalena Maia, Regulatory and Risk Compliance at Lemon. Those are three of the biggest companies in crypto nowadays in Argentina, so bienvenidos a todos.
Bueno, bienvenidos todos. Este panel lo vamos a hacer en castellano. Es un orgullo poder tener este panel de lujo. Quería empezar con Delfina. Pomelo opera en distintos países de Latinoamérica que tienen regulaciones muy distintas o en algunos casos no tienen regulaciones. ¿Nos querés contar un poco cómo manejan en Pomelo esta fragmentación regulatoria y cómo manejan también la relación con estos distintos reguladores?
Dale. Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación. Sí, Juan, como mencionabas, o sea, en Pomelo operamos hoy en más de 7 países de la región. Pomelo, digamos, para quienes quizás no lo conocen o para alinear un poco lo que hacemos, somos una empresa de tecnología que ofrecemos infraestructura financiera a clientes, es decir, somos una empresa B2B. No somos cripto, pero muchos de nuestros clientes sí lo son y lo que ofrecemos es el procesamiento emisor de pagos con tarjeta, así como también un servicio que llamamos de Mean Sponsorship, que es la posibilidad de que nuestros clientes se conecten o puedan emitir, digamos, tarjetas a través de nuestra licencia con las marcas de bandera, de esta manera ofreciendo, digamos, la solución completa de emisión, procesamiento de las tarjetas que nuestros clientes ofrecen a sus usuarios finales. Muchos de los clientes cripto lo ofrecen, digamos, a través de sus wallets. Como mencionabas, Latinoamérica, o sea, la característica es la fragmentación en la regulación, quizás a diferencia de otros mercados como Europa, en donde uno puede salir con una licencia a ofrecer un producto en todos los países. En Latinoamérica lo que te sirve en un país, en otro país directamente puede estar prohibido. Entonces, digamos, es algo que hay que tenerlo en cuenta desde el principio, en el momento en que uno quiere construir el producto o ofrecer el servicio. Si bien, digamos, a nivel operativo hay que tener una cuestión modular, digamos, de poder tener, para poder tener escalabilidad, la realidad es que hay que tener en cuenta mucho la regulación puntual de cada país. Como decía, o sea, por ejemplo, en Brasil tenés muy ya citado el tema de Open Finance, de Instant Payments con PIX, mientras que en otros países no, o es incipiente, digamos, en Chile va a empezar el año que viene, en Argentina recién ahora están los lineamientos. Un tema de datos personales también, o sea, en países que están muy avanzados, como mismo Brasil, como mencionaba también, pero en otros países en donde recién ahora están reforzando la regulación, como es en Chile, y recién va a tener impacto el año que viene. Entonces, digamos, hay que tener muy en cuenta, digamos, en dónde uno quiere salir a ofrecer, qué es lo que establece esa regulación. A la vez también el tema cultural, es decir, que a veces capaz se deja de lado, pero digamos, cómo es cada regulador, quién es cada regulador. Quizás en Argentina y en Brasil el Banco Central tiene un montón de peso, no hay una ley fintech, digamos, que esté unificada, como si es en México, como si es en Chile, que tienen a la vez otros reguladores, como la CNBB o CMF. Entonces hay que conocer, digamos, quién es el regulador, qué tiempos tiene, digamos, cómo suele autorizar, acercarse, digamos, de manera temprana a la hora de querer ofrecer un producto. Digamos, un poco acá lo que nosotros tenemos es el compliance o la regulación, digamos, como ADN del producto. O sea, primero armar el roadmap regulatorio y luego el roadmap del producto. Cosa de que ya en tu producto vos sepas que estás compliant, tus clientes se queden tranquilos de que cumplís con la norma, con la regulación en cada país. Y eso te permite también poder escalar y ofrecer, digamos, a distintos clientes en la región que quieren lanzar en más de un país y asegurarse, digamos, que van con un partner que lo permite y que está seguro de eso. Lo mismo también temas de datos, o sea, digamos, hay países, como mencionaba, que están más avanzados, otros no. Digamos, acá lo que tenemos es un estándar, digamos, alto a nivel quizás GDPR, en donde en Brasil sí se asemeja, pero en otros países no, entonces así te aseguras también de cumplir con toda la normativa. O sea, acá lo que lo vemos es como la regulación es, o sea, no debería ser un freno, sino que hay que capitalizarlo y usarlo como un distintivo, digamos, como para ofrecer valor y generar un producto que sea completo desde el principio.
Buenísimo. Y Magdalena, yo quería preguntarte, hace poco Argentina aprobó su regulación de proveedores de servicios de activos virtuales. Veníamos de un régimen que era un simple registro y ahora empezaron a imponerse obligaciones de todo tipo. Patrimonio mínimo, reporting, políticas internas. ¿Cómo encararon eso en Pomelo?
Sí, bueno, gracias. Un poco para que tengan el contexto de cómo fue todo este camino regulatorio. Como todos sabrán, estos son lineamientos y estándares internacionales que vienen dados por el Grupo Internacional de Acción Financiera, el GAFI, que establece los lineamientos necesarios para que los países adopten para prevenir el lavado de dinero. Allá por marzo de 2024, el GAFI nos encontraba evaluándonos como país y bueno, se decide reformar la ley de prevención de lavado y se incorpora a los proveedores de servicios de activos virtuales como sujetos obligados ante la Unidad de Información Financiera y se delega en CNB, en la Comisión Nacional de Valores, un registro, justamente porque lo que el GAFI considera es que si no tenemos un regulador que pueda supervisar este tipo de actividades, no hay control y por lo tanto no hay prevención y combate contra este tipo de delitos. Creo que el impacto más grande lo tuvieron quizás los más chicos, empresas como Ripio, como Lemon, por ahí somos estructuras internacionales que venimos operando también en diferentes países de Latinoamérica y que ya tenemos otro tipo de licencias y ya hemos aplicado a otras licencias similares a lo que fue Argentina. Por ejemplo, no sé, El Salvador ya tenía un régimen de licencia y por lo tanto un marco regulatorio. Entonces, ese tipo de empresas ya tenían un marco consolidado y un compliance preparado para afrontar todo eso. Incluso el requisito de patrimonio neto mínimo, la verdad que exige según las categorías a las cuales se va a inscribir el PESAB, pero bueno, el monto más alto son $150.000, para este tipo de empresas no es un monto elevado, a comparación, por ejemplo, de otros marcos, como puede ser el de Brasil, que exige un patrimonio neto mínimo de $2 millones. La diferencia es realmente significativa. Pero bueno, en lo que respecta a cómo nos preparamos, es cierto, pasamos de un registro muy simple, provisorio, que fue, nada, presentar documentación muy escueta, y después ingresamos en el periodo de adecuación, que fueron 6 meses. Lo interesante es que también se incorporan a las personas jurídicas extranjeras, o sea, los proveedores de servicios de activos virtuales obligados a inscribirse ante CNB, son tanto personas humanas y jurídicas nacionales como extranjeras, siempre que provean sus servicios a argentinos o en Argentina, ¿no? Así que, nada, creo que tuvimos el tiempo suficiente, que el regulador dio los espacios para hacer mesas de trabajo, para construir también junto a la industria. Creo que eso es muy importante, porque esta tecnología está buenísima y tiene mucho valor, que creo que hay que seguir educando a los reguladores y transmitiendo, ¿no? Porque está todo on-chain, es transparente, y la tecnología incorpora un montón de herramientas que transmiten seguridad, tanto de cara a nuestros usuarios y transparencia, pero también al regulador, como puede ser, por ejemplo, una prueba de reserva para ver en tiempo real los activos custodiados de los usuarios. Y bueno, después todo lo que es política son procesos de adecuación y creo que el tiempo fue prudente y se está haciendo de forma progresiva también, ¿no? Porque el marco regulatorio existe, pero el regulador también comenzó a avanzar en nuevas interpretaciones a su propia regulación y fue dando mayores lineamientos, y creo que este es un camino que empezamos a construir entre todos. A partir de ahora es como todo lo que comencemos a hacer será un poco prueba y error y bueno, ir construyendo entre todos.
Buenísimo. Lucrecia, otra de las novedades que hubo este último año fue el régimen de tokenización de valores negociables, tokenización de securities, que si bien no es una tokenización nativa como muchos estaban esperando, la verdad que es un paso muy importante en esto de empezar a unir la finanza tradicional con blockchain. Y ustedes hicieron, creo que, algunas innovaciones muy divertidas e interesantes. ¿Nos querés contar?
Dale. Bueno, sí, como decía Juan, la CNB sacó un régimen de representación digital de valores negociables, algo sumamente innovador a nivel, te diría, mundial casi, y bueno, y regional también. Nosotros desde Ripio venimos acompañando a través de la Cámara FinTech a la CNB con todas las consultas públicas que fue sacando hasta llegar a la resolución 1081, que bueno, para los que no saben, establece principalmente la posibilidad de efectuar la representación digital de valores negociables tradicionales, así como hoy estaba previsto en la norma la representación cartular y escritural, se suma ahora la representación digital. Algo que hace CNB mucho hincapié es que bueno, este nuevo régimen no implica una dualidad de títulos, sino una nueva forma de representar. Y lo que implica esto es como un acercamiento entre el mercado tradicional y este nuevo mercado digital, porque de alguna manera la norma establece y permite la creación de un nuevo mercado que opera de forma ininterrumpida, con menores costos de entrada, acercando a un nuevo perfil de inversores que capaz antes no participaban en el mercado tradicional y con todo el plus de lo que es la tecnología blockchain, ¿no? Así que la verdad que sí, fue un hito muy importante y desde Ripio, a los pocos días que salió la regulación, nosotros salimos con la tokenización del bono AL30, elegimos bueno, el bono más líquido del mercado, salimos con un título público que la norma lo prevé, no requiere autorización de CNB para efectuar esta representación, a diferencia de lo que son capaz los títulos privados. Pero bueno, tuvo muy buena recepción y aparte desde Ripio, bueno, para los que no saben, tenemos no solo la wallet, que es el producto más retail, tenemos también nuestro propio exchange, que opera similar a como opera Binance, Kraken, a nivel, bueno, LATAM. Y desde Ripio y a través de nuestro exchange traemos también la posibilidad de proveer liquidez del token, en este caso puntual del L30, que es el único que hoy en día está circulando, pero traemos también esta solución para el resto de los PSAP que quieran empezar a salir con la tokenización, la liquidez a través de Ripio Trade. Y bueno, y después un hito también que fue bastante importante y novedoso fue el pasado 26 de octubre, que fueron las elecciones legislativas. Y bueno, fue la primera vez en la historia que un bono soberano estuvo operando en el mismo momento que estaba teniendo lugar la jornada electoral. Así que también fue muy importante. Desde Ripio también nos pudimos posicionar como referentes tanto del precio del bono, de cómo estaba cotizando en ese momento, según el boca de urna, cómo iban saliendo los resultados, como así también el dólar cripto, dando un poco también las pistas de cómo iba a abrir el mercado al día siguiente. Así que también fue algo muy novedoso. Y bueno, y como decía, ahora salimos con un título público, pero sí hay un montón de emisores privados muy interesados en salir también con su propia tokenización de valores. Así que bueno, muy abiertos y entusiasmados con todo lo que este nuevo mercado va a traer.
Buenísimo. Y ahora les hago una pregunta a las tres, que sería, ¿qué novedades esperamos en los próximos años respecto, ya sea a nivel regulatorio o impacto de la tecnología en la regulación? Como quieran.
Bueno, ahí si quieren, un poco mencioné antes, pero y relacionado también a la tokenización, o sea, lo que es sandbox regulatorio en Argentina, me parece que llegó para quedarse. Un poco eso es el mensaje que están dando tanto desde el regulador como desde el gobierno, es decir, fomentar, digamos, este tipo de cuestiones. Y lo mismo, creo que para muchos países de la región el sistema de finanzas abiertas creo que es algo que viene para quedarse y que va a haber, digamos, que regulatoriamente adecuarse o estar preparado para eso, digamos, en relación a todo lo que es también manejo de datos, más allá de lo que es la conexión entre los sistemas. Hay que estar preparado para cumplir regulatoriamente con todo lo que van a pedir, teniendo en cuenta que también hay normativa que ya existe y que seguramente tarde en adecuarse y va a ver que, digamos, la tecnología siempre viene antes que la regulación. Entonces hay que estar siempre preparados para estar compliant con eso.
Sí, coincido y creo que tokenización es el claro ejemplo de esto, cómo tienen que empezar a convivir y a complementarse, ¿no? Todo lo que son las finanzas tradicionales quizás con todo este nuevo mundo de activos virtuales y Web3. Me cuesta mucho identificar algo puntual, algún proyecto, porque realmente es una industria muy innovadora y muy creativa, entonces podemos estar pensando en cosas muy locas realmente, pero lo que sí veo de bueno es esta apertura en Argentina y en toda la TAM de los reguladores de abrirse a estas nuevas tecnologías y poder regularlas e incorporarlas, que en definitiva es lo que les da de nuevo claridad, transparencia, seguridad a los usuarios y también más seguridad jurídica. Y es clave la incorporación de tecnología y nada, en estos equipos no de legales, compliance, empezar a sumar todas esas herramientas que son también necesarias para impulsar y adecuarse a las normativas.
Bueno, sí, un poco lo que decían las chicas. La realidad, por lo menos en el caso de Argentina, tenemos unos regulares, y hablo en el caso de CNB, con mucha apertura y con mucha intención de innovar y sobre todo también de dialogar con las empresas del sector. Yendo al caso concreto de tokenización, me imagino capaz en un tiempo, capaz una norma ya, porque ahora estamos en un marco de un sandbox, pero una norma específica y que pueda tener, que sea un poco más abierta porque hoy tiene ciertas limitaciones, que pueda terminar de interactuar el mercado tradicional con el mercado digital. Y bueno, como decían también, la realidad es que son productos sumamente innovadores, creativos y tenemos que estar siempre nosotros desde la parte legal como un paso adelante en lo que es regulatorio y ser siempre creativos también al momento de diseñar los productos porque bueno, también tenemos que tener como esa capacidad de ir después a explicárselo bien al regulador para que después el regulador nos saque un marco que nos favorezca a todos.
Buenísimo, sería ese rol que mencionaban en el panel anterior de ser medio traductores, ¿no? Entre la gente del producto y el regulador y tratar de encontrar un intermedio para que todo funcione y camine. Bueno, muchas gracias, súper interesante todo lo que nos contaron.
Well, thank you everybody for staying. Now we have lunch. We have an hour to eat, to see a tango show, and to rest a bit. See you then. Bien, Mauro.